Internet, it's me, and today Star Wars Can't Catch Me. Let's check out Game Theory. This Star Wars item could actually exist soon. From the Game Theorist. Together, let's go. Let's start.
Can flying vehicles actually exist? I'm not talking about helicopters or drones or whatever this thing is. I'm talking about the kind of thing we see in Star Wars Outlaws. Something that looks and acts like a regular motorcycle, just without those old-fashioned wheels. Is there actual science in this science fiction, or does it just fall apart when you don't have the magical force binding it together? Well, dear theorists, we're about to find out.
May the Force be with you. Game Theory.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that's only worried about one force, gravity. Especially when it comes to today's topic, because this episode is sponsored by Ubisoft and
Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory.
the latest game, Star Wars Outlaws. Made in collaboration with Lucas Games, Star Wars Outlaws changes the typical Star Wars formula in a great way. Instead of focusing on Jedi, the Force, and lightsabers, we get to see the other side of the coin and live out our Han Solo fantasies of being a galactic scoundrel as we take on the role of Kay Vess. Set between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, the Empire are trying desperately to snuff out the rebellion, which leaves small planets on the edge of the galaxy with very little oversight, allowing the criminal underworld to rise up and take control. Ubisoft actually invited me and a bunch of other creators to LA so we could get to see the game firsthand. It was great to meet other creators and compare notes with what we enjoyed about the game. For some, it was the complete open world, which surprisingly is a first for the Star Wars franchise. For others, it was the dynamic reputation system that dramatically changes your gameplay depending on who you side with. And some just really enjoyed getting to pet your adorable companion Nix. I may have been one of them. Who's a good boy? Who's the goodest little alien that ferociously attacks the faces of my enemies? You are? Yeah, you are. However,
Oh, come on. Santi is not your enemy. He is the host for the game, the film, the style. Santi is the host for Santi is the host for the food theorists. Yeah, correct.
was one part of the game that everyone I spoke to agreed that they loved: the speeder bike. Nothing quite beats jumping on your speeder and whizzing off to explore the massive open world before you. It really made me want to go home and take my own motorcycle on an adventure. But then, reality set in. Sure, riding my bike definitely makes boring trips a little more exhilarating, but it doesn't really compare to the coolness that is essentially a hover bike. How can I feel truly free when I'm always attached to the ground? Which leaves the obvious question: will hover vehicles like that ever be possible? People have been asking this question since the 1950s, and yet decades have gone by, and I'm still reliant on ground-based wheels like a chump. That being said, just because it hasn't hit the main...
The awkward thing is when he mentioned 1950s, some of the audience grandparents were not even born yet.
doesn't mean science isn't making huge strides in this field. All those kids that grew up watching Star Wars are now out there making tech that could turn these pieces of science fiction into science facts. So, will it ever be possible to have a speeder bike like Kay's? Prepare to jump to lightspeed, theorists, because the answers are out there. We just need to find them. Ready? Punch it. If we're gonna get a hover bike of our own, I figured it would probably be wise to take a look at what science, or science, the game actually uses to achieve this. And fortunately, I had the chance to sit down with the developers and ask them directly. You gotta love a primary source. They confirmed to me that much like other speeders in Star Wars, Kay's speeder uses technology known as repulsor lift. This tech is used all over the Star Wars universe, from pod racers to assault vehicles, even to chairs. Basically, if it's floating, it's probably using repulsor lift. But what does that actually mean? Well, there is an official book series that's designed to show the inner working...
I don't think the last one is correct, because it's Yoda can use the Force.
of various vehicles from Star Wars, including repulsor lift technology, and it's called Incredible Cross Sections. According to those books, repulsor lift technology works by pushing against gravity in order to produce thrust, which is pretty vague. Isn't that kinda just how thrust works in general? But not to worry, because there's one other book that goes into a little bit more detail: the YT-1300 Millennium Falcon Owner's Workshop Manual. It states that repulsor lift engines achieve this thrust by creating a field of negative gravity, which pushes against each planet's own gravitational field. That's all just a lot of fancy words that simply translate to one thing: anti-gravity. Unfortunately for my childhood dream of hovering off into the sunset, anti-gravity doesn't actually exist. And I don't mean that we've looked around the universe and just haven't figured it out yet. I mean anti-gravity cannot exist. It would literally break the rules of physics as we know it. Every object in the universe has mass, and everything that has mass also has a gravitational pull, from the tiniest electrons to supermassive black holes. So, in order for something to be the opposite of that, to have an anti-gravitational pull, or would it be push at that point? Either way, to achieve that, it would therefore need negative mass, and that's just not possible. Unlike some of the other forces in our universe, like electricity or magnetism, which can have positive and negative values, or north and south poles, gravity only has positive values. If you take two objects and smush them together, their masses always add to each other. They never cancel out. Even stuff like antimatter, which sounds like it should be the complete opposite of regular matter, has been proven to have regular mass and therefore be affected by gravity like everything else. So,
But having said that, do recognize that Star Wars is in a galaxy far, far away. It's like hundreds, thousands of years later. Think about the technological advancements. It's much better than ours. Yeah.
with Star Wars lore understandably leaning more into fiction than science, is there something that does exist that could help get my hoverbike dreams off the ground? Now, I'm sure a lot of you out there are already looking at your screens thinking, Tom, we already have vehicles that hover. They're literally called hovercrafts. And yes, you're right. Those are hovering vehicles. We've even seen ones that are roughly the size of a motorcycle. But there's a big reason they don't fit the bill for our speeder bike. Hovercrafts work by sucking in air and sending it through high-powered fans, which in turn pressurizes the air and sends it directly underneath the vehicle. This creates an air cushion that allows the hovercraft to, well, hover, or at least partially. In order to make sure that the air doesn't immediately expand outwards, hovercrafts have what's called a skirt, which keeps the air pressure contained and pointing down, allowing it to keep you off the ground. But
And also, I watched the Tom Scott video. It is very difficult to maneuver, even at low speed. Think about it from point of view of, yeah, it's gonna be very difficult if you're driving on high speed and you try to maneuver. You're gonna crash.
Take a look at Kay's speeder bike, or any speeder bike for that matter. We can see there's no skirt on this thing, which means there's no pressurized air cushion to hold it up, and that means hovercrafts ain't gonna cut it. Plus, I'm not really sure anyone can look cool while riding something like this. Now, you don't strictly need a skirt to use fans or propellers for flight. Companies like Aerofex, Hoversurf, and Airwinds Technologies have created flying motorcycle-style vehicles using incredibly powerful fans and propellers to create the lift that keeps you off the ground. But at that point, it feels more like you're flying than levitating. And while K-Speeder does clearly displace some amount of dust and debris, the sand clouds these things create are extreme. If this were our solution, we would be the reason that sand gets everywhere in this universe, and I'm not sure Anakin would take too kindly to that. But you see, I
hate sand.
got to inspect the bike close up at the Ubisoft event. And let me tell you, the attention to detail was so on point, even the throttle and switches worked, which means that I can confirm there are no fans anywhere on this thing. So we're safe from Vader's wrath this time, but with that as a dead end, I need to keep looking. Fortunately, there was one more device that I'd remembered from my many years on the internet, and I was hoping that it would provide the solution. Back in 2015, Lexus came out with a very impressive commercial for a new type of transportation, a skateboard. Not exactly a new kind of technology, and definitely not what you'd expect from a car company, but it was for good reason. It was unlike anything we'd seen before. It was hovering. That isn't CGI, that is an actual working hoverboard that real people were able to ride and do tricks on. The secret? A super unique material known as a superconductor. Despite the name, superconductors aren't train employees with superpowers. Instead, they are materials that, when cooled down to an extreme extremely low temperature, their electrons are able to freely move around in such a way that the object is able to produce an electromagnetic field. And as we can see from the commercial, they are super powerful. It even goes over the water, which is perfect for our speeder bike. In Star Wars Outlaws, Kay can encounter experts that help her upgrade her tech, and one of those upgrades is a hydro repulsor that allows her to ride over water. However, while this hoverboard looks good on the surface, once I took a peek under the hood, all of my hovering dreams quickly melted away.
From what I know, it needs to be super cold. And this is not possible, you know, with all the sand, with all the heat, it's a desert, it's gonna be very hot.
Superconductive materials like yttrium, barium, copper oxide only exhibit their superconductive properties when they are cooled to a temperature of minus 180 degrees Celsius or
AKA super duper cold.
minus 292 degrees Fahrenheit. Maintaining those low temperatures is going to be super impractical on desert planets, or, you know, in the UK during the recent heat waves. For the Lexus commercial, they were literally pouring in liquid nitrogen to keep it working, because if you don't, you'll find yourselves grounded once again, and that's not even the biggest issue. You may have caught it when I was explaining superconductors, but they aren't some magical material that just float on anything. Superconductors float because they produce a magnetic field. And if you've ever played with magnets as a kid, or as an adult, don't judge me, you'll know that a magnetic field will only repel if you have two magnets of the same polarity. Meaning, for the superconductor's magnetic field to cause it to float, there would have to be a magnetic field underneath it for it to repel against in the first place. And that is exactly what is happening in this commercial. According to The Verge,
The board must be ridden above a highly engineered track that's carefully embedded with magnets, strong enough to hold the board and a rider.
Yep, this whole skate park, even the floor underneath the water, was covered with magnets. As
They
soon
actually rigged the entire place. That's impressive. Very impressive.
as you leave that magnetic floor, that board and our speeder is going to just drop out of the sky. Now,
That's all,
according
folks.
to the Ultimate Star Wars reference book, planets like Tatooine have large amounts of metal ores close to the surface, and those ores have strange magnetic properties. So if all other planets were the same, then it might be possible for superconductors to be used for speeders, but it certainly isn't going to help us on our planet. And call me crazy, but I'm not exactly sure we could convince every world government to put a bunch of magnets underneath every square foot of ground just so I could feel cool while I ride my bike to the store. So if all existing science is going to fail me, then we're going to have to try something a little more theoretical. My favorite. And in the world of theoretical science, there is something that not only allows for levitation, but doesn't require the installation of other materials into the ground, and it is still completely invisible to the naked eye. Let me introduce you all to the wonderful world of acoustic levitation, which is exactly what it sounds like. Yeah, even I'm disappointed in that one. Sorry. Basically,
So you levitate, you float with sound? With audio? What?
acoustic levitation uses the power of sound waves to make things float. How exactly does that work? Well, it's a little complicated. It would probably take me hours to break it all down fully. Here's the simplified version. If you have two speakers pointed at each other and start blasting some high-frequency sound waves, something interesting happens. At certain points in between, the two waves would amplify each other, creating parts of the wave that are stronger and other parts of the waves that cancel out. The alternating patterns of strong and weak waves creates these little shelves that are able to hold objects in place. And the cool part is, even if you put something inside the field like your hand or a plant or rock that you're driving over, it doesn't interrupt the levitation field. It continues floating. It also works with liquids. They stay in droplet form and can be moved around and interact with other objects in the levitation field, which is so cool to see and could be used for a water-faring speeder. And if you're worried that these sound waves are going to be unsuitable for sneaking around hut outposts, rest assured that the sound being used to make acoustic levitation possible is ultrasonic, meaning it can't be heard by human ears. As for whether it can be detected by Jabba's ears, not sure. Does he even have ears? Regular slugs can't hear anything, so I guess we're fine. But you may have noticed that much like we needed two magnets for superconductors to work, for acoustic levitation, you need two speakers to make it work. Or do you? Experiments have been done as far back as the 90s to try and eliminate the need for two speakers. They used just
Whoa! 1995. That is nearly 30 years ago. 3 decades ago. Nearly. Wow.
one speaker aimed directly at a 10-kilogram object and blasted it with sound waves to make it float. And you know what? It worked. Just about. It was only able to lift the object a few hundred micrometers, but still, like most science, this is only going to get better with time. We'll be able to lift heavier and heavier things higher and higher off the ground. All we need to do is, theoretically, turn the system over, blast sound waves at the ground, and because the ground ain't moving anywhere, you'd find yourself being lifted into the air. So then, why is there still a decent chunk of the video left? Because why?
Yeah, there's still like 7 minutes into the video. Why? 7 minutes.
While I think this technology is cool and I really wanted it to be the solution, even on a theoretical level, there are still issues I can't overlook. Yes, acoustic levitation could potentially raise your speeder while on solid ground, but as soon as you move over to the water, you're gonna run into some problems. All that talk about being able to levitate liquids with sound, yeah, doesn't really work in reverse. Liquid is obviously not a solid, it's literally another state of matter, and so if you were to fire sound waves at it, it's gonna get pushed outwards, meaning your speeder has nothing to push against, and so you'll just keep sinking and sinking until you end up at the bottom of the lake. But even if you decided to just ignore the hydro upgrades, you're still not really in the clear. Remember when I said—
Oh, so you just be thinking and thinking and sinking and sinking and sinking. What am I saying? Thinking, sinking. I'm sorry.
the speakers use ultrasonic waves. That frequency may fall outside our normal range of hearing, but that doesn't mean it can't hurt the rest of you. Ultrasonic frequencies start at around 20 kilohertz, but people exposed to frequencies above just 17 kilohertz have been noted to suffer from fatigue, nausea, headaches, and dizziness. Long-term exposure, like riding your motorcycle for hours as you explore the open world, has the potential to cause even more damage to your biological tissues, heating them up through vibrations, leading to a severe case of death, which I would define as a suboptimal result. So despite it being cool and definitely sci-fi as heck, I once again had to go back to the drawing board, and honestly, I was feeling pretty doubtful I was going to find something. Everything I tried, every scientific principle, every theoretical concept, nothing was able to completely satisfy the criteria set out by Star Wars Outlaws. And
even the best one that he mentions, the acoustic thingy, acoustic levitation, it's suboptimum results, aka fatal results. I like it that he's being so nice with the word suboptimal results instead of saying the actual result is fatal results.
much like Kay during the game, I was running out of options. I was ready to hurl myself into the vacuum of space because at least then, no one could hear me scream as I drove myself insane. And that's when it hit me. Space. I was so focused on technology being used to make hovering vehicles here on Earth, I completely ignored the fact that we have people who work day in and day out to defy the laws of gravity. NASA. Most of the time, they use what you'd expect for modern rockets. They get off the ground by essentially exploding large quantities of fuel and letting the force of that explosion lift the rocket into space. But that isn't the only kind of engine they have at their disposal. They have been working on other methods of propulsion for space travel, and one of them solves every problem we've had. It can keep things off the ground and off the water, it doesn't blow sand everywhere, and it's completely silent. No fans, no magnets, no theoretical speakers. Plus, to top it all off, it could plausibly fit into our motorcycle-like design. At least in a few years. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you ion propulsion. And it's so simple, I'm kind of annoyed I didn't think about it sooner. Ion engines work by firing ions, if the name wasn't a big giveaway. Ions are particles that have either a positive or a negative charge. Most commonly these days, they use an element known as xenon, and through the use of powerful electric currents, these xenon atoms lose their electrons, forming positively charged xenon ions, which is then fired out of the back of the engines, providing thrust. NASA has been using these engines when they want to get satellites to very far distances very quickly. In fact, they've been using ion engines to explore the outer reaches of our solar system since as early as 1998 with the Deep Space One probe. But it doesn't.
1998, that is nearly 30 years ago. Wow. I mean, seriously, wow. Nearly 3 decades ago they have been using it. Wow.
doesn't just work in space where there's no gravity either. In 2021, Undefined Technologies created a fully electric hovering drone using, you guessed it, ion propulsion. And as you can see, it works. No big gusts of wind, no noise, just thrust. It also doesn't rely on having something solid beneath it to push against, which means it can work on water, on land, pretty much anywhere you can think of. It even solves problems I haven't mentioned about the speeder yet. K-Speeder is able to make very short and sharp side-to-side movements to avoid enemy fire at a push of a button, and one of the other upgrades she gets allows the speeder to do a short jump directly upwards. With most of our options, these just wouldn't be possible, at least not with the speed and precision that we see in the game, but with ion propulsion, we can. For dodging, all you have to do is have small ion thrusters in the correct spot, and then have a button to activate that thruster for a quick burst of side-to-side movement. And for the jump, ion propulsion works just like any other thruster. Give it a little more juice by having a button that injects a couple million extra ions through the thruster, and bam! You've gained some extra height for a short moment. Now, I should probably say that at this point in time, the best ion engines we have are only able to generate about 1 Newton of force, which is...
But he did mention at this point in time, 2024. What if we give it a decade or two? Maybe half a century later when I'm an old man, I can try riding a bicycle. You know, the old classic bicycle. By then, I'll have children already. I'll have grandchildren already. It's like, look, this is how your grandfather used to cycle. But without the ion thingy.
a far cry from the 650 newtons you need to pick up a person, let alone a motorcycle. Given how this kind of technology tends to develop over time, it's only gonna get better from here. And do you know who else believed in that idea? George Lucas himself.
Because, oh my goodness. If the GOAT, G-O-A-T, greatest of all time, if the GOAT actually believed in that, hey.
The funniest part of all of this is that ion propulsion has been used for countless vehicles in the Star Wars universe. It just tends to be for the bigger spacefaring ones rather than the smaller on-planet ones. TIE Fighter literally stands for twin ion engines, so we don't even have to break the law for this to be possible. I mentioned that NASA had been using ion thrusters to explore deep space since 1998, but the first ever engine was actually tested in 1964. So it would seem that George is just like us. He was
1964. That is how long ago? 7, 8, 9, 0, 1, 2. 60 years ago. You do recognize that some of you watching this video, your grandparents are not even that old. Wow.
Literally putting the science into science fiction. He used a technology that, no, didn't completely work when it was first tested, and it wouldn't be perfected or widely adopted for a good few years, but he saw the potential if you just gave it time. And that, friends, is what it truly means to be a theorist. All we need now is for NASA to stop trying to send people to Mars and instead working on making ion-propelled hover bikes. Please.
To be fair, it shows that George Lucas is a visionary. When it all started back in the days, decades ago, he saw the potential and he recognized how important it is.
I need it. Shut up and take my money. But hey, I just gotta say thank you one final time to the sponsor of today's video, Ubisoft. It's been such a blast trying to make all of this crazy sci-fi tech fit into our realistic world, which feels fitting because Star Wars Outlaws is exactly that. While there's still plenty of aliens, laser blasters, and space travel, it feels really grounded. I wasn't sure how I'd feel about a game with no magical force powers, but Ubisoft did an incredible job hooking me into that part of the universe. The different crime syndicates you interact with throughout the game feel truly alive thanks to Outlaw's dynamic reputation system. Every action you do or don't take changes how they feel about you and locks you out of certain places while giving you access to others. And you can experience all of this for yourselves right now. Just head on down to the description and click the link to download the game today and begin your own journey through a galaxy far, far away. The game is available on Xbox Series S and X, PlayStation 5, and PC. So whatever your preference, Ubisoft's got you covered. And that's great because you're probably gonna be here a while. This open world is huge, like huge, full of side quests, loot, even a fun secret or two if you look hard enough, which I'm sure you theorists will find in no time.
I think it'll be a brilliant game, it'll be a good game, but the Game of the Year award for 2024, 黑神话悟空. I'm sorry, it's just a bad year for you guys. Sorry.
Once again, go and check out the game by clicking
It's just my senseless predictions. Maybe I'm wrong. Sorry.
the link in the description. Thanks again to Ubisoft for sponsoring this video, and as always friends, remember, it's all just a theory. A game theory! Thanks for watching.
Well, thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching. Thank you.